Okay, so now we're just going to go over some other basic forms of stitching. The machine is definitely a main one, but hand stitching is also another huge part of sewing and fashion in general. So I'm just going to go over some of the basic different kinds of stitches here. Here we have the different kinds of base stitching. That's usually used just to tack pieces of fabric together, like if you're setting in a sleeve or just temporarily putting two pieces of fabric together. Those are the stitches you want to use. A running stitch is also very similar too. They're really honestly like the same, but then the back stitch and the prick stitch are pretty much similar too. I guess just the length of them are a little different, but they're used. This is probably the closest stitch you're going to get by hand as you could get with the machine. This is a really good method for setting in zippers, because sometimes putting it through the machine could be a little tedious, and you know, if you're worried about your zipper sliding, you have a lot of control by using this stitch to set in your zippers. Although if you're doing an invisible zipper, you would want to do a base stitch first to temporarily hold the zipper in place and then use the machine. So hand stitching is a really good tool for almost setting up using the machine, and you know, keeping things in place. It'll be a really big lifesaver, and it keeps things really neat too. Tailor's tacks are used a lot in tailoring to, you know, when you're sewing like the inside of a coat. People don't really know, but there's like a lot of things inside of a coat that people don't see, like horsehair and stuff like that. So usually if tailors are marking their spots or a place of interest that they want to go back to, they'll use a tailor's tack, which is almost like making a knot in the middle of the fabric. A cross stitch, I think, and a chain stitch are kind of more decorative. They're really not functional, really. They're just kind of more of a decorative sort of stitch. Blanket stitch is sort of the same thing too. You'll see this a lot on fleece blankets and stuff like that as a finishing. Catch stitch is another form of stitching that allows two pieces of fabric to be attached to one another. So if you see, like, it kind of creates like an X sort of shape, and on either end it allows like a little bridge of thread to go across the two pieces of fabric so they stay together. So that's used a lot if you want to put like a backing to fabric. Like a lot of the times if you want to put horsehair interfacing, which is like a really thick material, that's usually put on like the inside of coats, like on lapels and stuff like that. So catch stitching is used as a method for keeping that in place, so then the coat, when you turn it around, it'll be stiff and you won't know it's there because it's invisible on the other side. Slip basting is another great way for doing hems. I mean, there's a hem stitch here and an overarching stitch. These are like two ways of doing a hem, but personally I like to do a slip stitch, which is invisible. So basically you kind of wiggle your needle between two pieces of fabric or a fold of fabric, so that way you don't come up on either side. It takes a lot of time to do, but it's really worth it. It comes out great. So that's used a lot for finishes and for hems and stuff like that. Now I'm going to make my way to the beading sampler. So this paper looks really tacky, I apologize, but it gets the point across. So I'm just going to show you some different methods of beading. I'm not a beading person personally, but you know, these methods are used a lot for like evening wear, costume, stuff like that. So over here we have just some basic methods of putting beads on. This is actually a back stitch where the back stitch is incorporated into the bead, so it keeps them down really securely. And this is just, these beads here are just literally tied at the end of each there's a knot tied at the end of each stitch after each bead, so that's how that's done. That's also used over here in the curve too, because if you use a back stitch for sewing the curved beads over here, it wouldn't really keep the shape of a curve. So usually you want to try and tie off each knot after the bead. This is a fringe bead. These are pretty fun. So usually like poke the needle through the fabric, put all the beads in, and then once you have the beads stacked up like this, you bring the needle back down to the top bead and then pull it through the bottom. So that's how you get the fringe. Okay. Let's see. So this is kind of like a different fringe bead, but then it has the regular sewn and curved beads. This is a really ambitious stitch because there's a few things combined. These are kind of like circular fringe beads, which is like, this is pretty fun. So it's really like all the same type of method. It's just used in different ways. Like, so that sort of back stitching deal is used over here too with the sequins. This is going to the right, this is going to the left. So So these are just two different ways of using it with sequins. Here they put different like perkai beads on top of the sequins. It's like really just more like a decorative thing. These are bugle beads. These are a pain to use only because the needle, sometimes it's difficult to get it through these beads. They break really easily, but they do look really cool when they're all put together. Let's see. These are paillettes. These are really tacky, and I hate using them. But you'll see these a lot in like recital outfits and like, you know, little kids' costumes and stuff. But usually you want to, as you tie them down, you want to kind of overlap them because you don't want to see the hole. That's the thing. So you really get more of like a layered look with the paillettes. That's the purpose of those. These are just different decorative trims that you could buy that you could sew on. So pretty much you just do like a back stitch or a regular stitch through the sequins and go throughout the trim, and in this example it's curved a little bit. Over here, this is just regular like seed beads as they call them. They're just little beads combined with bugle beads to make like a starburst sort of shape. Here's just another pattern with seed beads and the bugle beads. Here's some more fringe over here. And over here, these are some Dior roses. Basically, these Dior roses aren't really hard to make. They're just a bunch of football shapes. It's weird how like footballs are incorporated and everything, but they're like really like bigger and smaller football shapes sewn together at the bottom. There's usually like a circular piece of fabric that serves as a base for the flower, and then you use the football shapes to kind of sculpt it around the circle, and then you hand sew it to the bottom. So that's one way of doing it. That's this way. So usually, you can see underneath, see how there's a circular piece, and so they use the overarching stitch to sew the football shapes together to make this flower. And then over here, all the pieces were just sewn together, all the footballs, so the edges of them were sewn together by the machine and then pulled through to make the flower. So there's like two different methods. These are used a lot in like evening wears. You know, you can make a brooch from them, a barrette, or put them on like evening wear, bridal, or anything like that. And then pretty much that's it. You could do a lot with embroidery and beading. It really can make a statement for your garment if that's what you want. Color choice and all that stuff is really important too, and plus it's a lot of fun, therapeutic, and fun to do. So that's pretty much what beading and embroidery are for.